The joke was meant to entertain. It exposed everything.
The evening started with laughter that felt a little too loud, with a confidence that seemed rehearsed. The house was filled with warm lights, glasses were clinking, and conversations just overlapped into this big, blurry performance of status and social climbing. The alcohol was flowing, softening words but sharpening egos. With every drink poured, restraint just slipped a little further away. In that room, attention was like currency, and the biggest rewards went to whoever could speak the loudest, the boldest. I was standing there, surrounded by people, but I've never felt so invisible. I was just a background character in a space that was supposed to feel shared, like we were all in it together. It was a role I knew well, one I'd rehearsed over years of nights exactly like this one. As the hours passed, the jokes started to get sharper, drifting from playful banter into something careless and mean. Each laugh landed a little heavier than the last. I tried to join in, but quietly offering a thought that was meant to support someone else's point, not to compete with it. The response came back faster than I expected. The words were slurred, but the intent was deliberate, delivered with a smirk designed to entertain everyone else at my expense. For a split second, the room went completely silent. Then, nervous laughter filled the void. The embarrassment was immediate and hot, spreading through my chest like a fire alarm. I just stood there, silent, absorbing it all, just like I always had. But this time, that silence was mistaken for permission. The comments kept coming, getting louder and bolder with each one. I looked around, and people were looking away, anywhere but at me, avoiding eye contact so they wouldn't have to intervene. The discomfort in the room was palpable, everyone felt it, but no one said a word, and in that moment, it hit me. I realized just how often humiliation had been dressed up and served to me as humor. How many times I was expected to just take it, to laugh along, to be a good sport. The drink in my hand suddenly felt heavy and pointless. A sense of clarity cut through all the noise, sharp and effortless. I finally responded, but not with volume. I spoke quietly, but with a certainty that left no room for doubt. My words were calm, controlled, and final. The laughter stopped instantly. The amusement on their faces was replaced with shock. I didn't stick around for the reactions or the inevitable excuses. I left while the silence was still settling over the room. The cold night air hit me as I stepped outside. It was sobering and sharp, and it grounded me in a way that entire evening never could. It felt easier to breathe out there, away from it all. The drive home was quiet. My mind wasn't filled with anger, but with reflection. The patterns started to assemble themselves so clearly now that my denial was gone. I recognized how many times I had minimized moments just like this one. How often I had chosen to keep the peace at the expense of my own dignity. That night, sleep didn't come easily, but clarity did. Decisions were forming in my mind without any internal debate. When the morning came, it brought a sense of calm resolve, not regret. I knew exactly what needed to change. The conversations that followed in the next few days were brief and direct. I wasn't leaving any room for negotiation. Of course, the excuses came. They were framed as jokes you misunderstood or stress that made me act out, but none of it mattered anymore. Their attempts to downplay what happened only revealed the deeper issues, and it became clear that accountability was just not on the table. So, I created distance, deliberately. That space gave the truth room to breathe. My real friends noticed the shift right away, and support started to surface in the places where there had once been silence. My home felt quieter, but it also felt safer. The tension I'd been living with for so long started to slowly dissolve. I began reclaiming parts of myself I had abandoned, old routines, hobbies. Normalcy returned, but this time without the pressure to perform. My work became a focus, not just an escape. And slowly, steadily, my confidence started to rebuild itself. There were inconsistent attempts to reconnect, but they seemed driven more by their fear of being cut off than by any real reflection. My boundaries held firm. Time passed, but not in a straight line. It was marked by small victories and the occasional wave of doubt. Growth is like that. It refuses to be rushed. Eventually, the conversations we had became honest. stripped of all the performance. The truth, when it finally came out, landed heavier than any insult ever had. An acknowledgement of the hurt came late, but it felt sincere. The apologies carried weight, but not enough to reverse the damage that had been done. And that's when I understood something fundamental. Forgiveness doesn't guarantee a continuation of a relationship. Some lessons aren't here to help us repair things. They're here to redirect our path. Letting go of that connection felt far less painful than the thought of enduring that kind of disrespect over and over again. And once I accepted that, a wave of relief washed over me. Life simplified itself naturally without that constant underlying tension. Peace became a consistent presence in my life, not a conditional reward for staying quiet. I started noticing how often I smiled without forcing it. Laughter came back into my life, but this time it wasn't attached to cruelty. These new boundaries reshaped all of my relationships. Respect became the non-negotiable standard. I learned that my silence in the face of disrespect had been teaching people exactly how to treat me. All it took was speaking up just once to change the lesson. Slowly, the past began to lose its power over me. The memories softened from painful wounds into valuable lessons. Being independent started to feel empowering, not lonely. Choice replaced obligation. Now and then, a little regret would surface, but it no longer controlled my direction. Understanding replaced the bitterness I had been holding on to. This whole experience fundamentally reshaped how I measure my own worth. Other people's approval just lost its relevance. I began trusting the instincts I had ignored for so many years, and they proved to be incredibly reliable. Growth showed up quietly, without a big announcement. Confidence settled in naturally, without me having to fake it. The future started to feel expansive and full of possibility instead of something to be endured. I stopped making excuses for behavior that hurt me. That clarity I found removed any need for justification. The greatest change was internal. I no longer accepted being diminished for someone else's entertainment. My self-respect stopped being negotiable. My peace became essential. This story doesn't end with a dramatic confrontation or some kind of revenge. It ends with alignment. Walking away wasn't a dramatic act, it was a necessary one. I learned that words spoken casually, even as a joke, can reveal deeply rooted truths about a person. And those truths, they deserve a response. The silence after I left that party wasn't empty, it was healing. What lingered wasn't anger, but a profound sense of relief. The relief that I finally chose myself. Life didn't become perfect overnight, but it became honest. And I've learned that honesty is far more powerful than any sharp remark ever could be. Thank you so much for listening. If this story resonated with you, I'd love it if you'd subscribe and join our community. See you in the next one.